DiscoVision that you be the boss. Now I'd like to show you some of the valuable things your MCA DiscoVision system lets you do. Most persons find it more convenient. Gently pull up as you press down on the center shaft with your thumb. You'll hear a click. Simply plug one jack into this outlet. After I stop the action, you're going to practice using these buttons. The DiscoVision player gives you many special capabilities. Stop, play, slow, forward and reverse.
Imagine a dog chasing a rabbit around a tree.
How can you get there in a hurry? Now you enter the number just like dialing a push-button telephone. 2, 6, 3, 2, 4, search. DiscoVision. By the way, notice that the sound cuts off when you're running at anything other than normal speed. Use one of the step buttons. One single frame of picture is now held on the screen for as long as you want. Take as much time as you want, you're in control. Here's step forward. You found me again. Welcome back. Simply press stop. Jack stops the disc and returns it to the bar position. I'm sure you'll find using your new MCA DiscoVision system to be rewarding and enjoyable. I thank you for watching.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. Good morning, Biscuits. Good morning, Rod. Good morning, Marco. Good morning, Christina. And good morning, everyone else who's out there watching. I'm really appreciating the positive energy that we're all getting from one another. I really appreciate that. Slight technical hitch, of course. What would a live show be without a technical hitch? In the beginning, my encoder software seemed to crash. And it's one of those things, I'm glad a restart brought it back to life. I nearly pressed the stop button there in YouTube, but apparently when I do that, that means the event isn't going to be able to come back. So if I start streaming and I stop on YouTube, then that means that's it, basically. I have to create a new event. And everyone who's got the link is kind of, won't be able to get back on it. So I'm glad we are here. That's very cool. Very exciting news I have there from a viewer you may remember him. Sir Munchalot has left me a very, very long comment on the last stream. I'm going to share that with you. Oh yeah, actually, before we begin with that, I've made some technical changes at my end here. So first of all, I've moved this monitor slightly further over here. So that means I can keep a better eye on the chat. That also means I've moved that monitor slightly further over here. That had a few other implications there, but it's because last time, one of my viewers was complaining that I was ignoring him in the chat, and of course that's not my intention. I'm not ignoring anybody. I appreciate you guys being here, and I like keeping an eye on the chat, but I can't read every message while I'm doing my thing, so I do want to apologize for that. I've made some changes that makes it better for me to see the chat without having to go like that, because that's not helping anybody. So I've done that. I've also implemented second webcam, so that means when I'm going to the bottom right corner, there's going to be less clutter. Now let me show you what that's all about, because this is when I'm kind of throwing to this. That means I can do this. There we go. So I'm now a round cutout at the bottom right corner. Let me know what you think of that. I'm not sure. It's kind of, there's less clutter, but I don't know if I like it, so one of those things. Good morning, Angel. Good morning, Osaka. Is it Angel or is it Angel? I don't know. There we go. Please let me know. Sir Munchalot is back. You may remember him from one of my previous videos in which he made a long comment about how to create a ring flash in DAZ Studio. And he's left an extremely long comment. These are some of the messages I've been getting over the last week. And this is his comment here, Sir Munchalot. And there's some interesting information in there about the denoiser that we've talked about. And he's giving us some tips and starters and pointers about how to get started with VR on the cheap. So it's a very long comment, very much appreciate that. But he's mentioned something that I've heard before, and I wanted to share that with you because I thought it was hilarious. He was watching the video and he said, I've been watching another website and I found this. And that is something he said was kind of interesting. He said, have I ever considered a career as a lookalike? Because there seems to be a similarity between me and Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party in the UK. And I'm bringing this to your attention because this is not the first time somebody told me that. A few months ago, I took my PlayStation 3 apart, and here's another comment from Daniel Burns, who said, Jeremy Corbyn fixes a PS3 video. So I didn't really know what to make of that at the time. I just thought it was maybe he was talking about my accent, or the fact that I don't have that wild children's presenter type energy when I'm talking about things. But apparently he was referring to a similarity between me and Jeremy Corbyn. So what do you think? It's kind of look like looking in the mirror for me there. Don't know. Your thoughts are greatly appreciated on this subject, and that is all I want to say about that. What we're going to talk about today, of course, is how to create a waving flag in DAZ Studio. If I can remember where that is on my desktop. Here, there we go. This is it. So this is what I've been able to make last week, or over the course of this week, a waving flag with dForce in DAZ Studio. And this is inspired by an article I've written many years ago about how to do the same thing in Carrara. And in Carrara, there's a possibility of selecting vertices on the side of the object. So this is just a plain object in DAZ Studio. And I've selected vertices in Carrara there. and told Carrara, please make sure these do not participate in the simulation. And it looks like there is a way to do that in DAZ Studio as well, and I was excited and I wanted to share this with you. So I had a chat with Biscuits about that. Biscuits is joining us from Holland today, so great that you're here. That's very exciting. There is a way to assign dForce depending on the surfaces that are defined in the UVs on an object. And so my first test was to go into Blender and build this thing out and then select vertices or select polygons on the side and say this is a different group than that. And that's doable, that's possible, but there's a better way to do that in DAZ Studio, namely with weight maps, and I'll show you how to create one today and assign different properties to different polygon groups on the same object. That comes in handy if you're a 3D artist and you've already textured your object and you don't want the object, if you want to assign different dForce properties to different parts of the object, then you don't have to go and re-UV it and then re-texture it, because that's so much work. We don't really want that to happen. So I'll show you how that works. And the weight maps thing brings us on to something that I've been asked about 3 or 4 times over the course of the last week, and that is, can I explain how dForce magnets work? And magnets is a product that is made by Riversoft Art and Escher, and it's available on the DAZ website. And with little helper objects, you can basically animate the helper objects and the cloth will follow around. And that's a very exciting product. I haven't bought it. I don't know much about it. I've just looked at it and I thought, yeah, that could be interesting. But with many scripts products, there may be a way to do this in DAZ Studio without the product. And I don't think it's quite possible with the magnets. But at the same time, I haven't bought it. So here's the deal. If you want me to explain the magnets to you, drop $25 into my tip jar today with donations. I'll go ahead and use that money to buy the product and I'll make a video about that. How's that? If you're interested in magnets, please support me in doing that. I will show you a little way of how to do this without magnets today, and maybe that's something that'll come in handy, because it has to do with animating the cloth while simultaneously simulating it. So that could come in handy. And then another thing that, if we have time for this, I may also show you how to avoid exploding geometry in DAZ Studio. That is, thank you, yes. I think of Jeremy Corbyn as my older brother. That's one of those things. So if we have time at the end, depending on how long it'll take, I will also show you how to avoid exploding geometry in dForce, and perhaps there's also another way to have a look at where we can extract an error message that what dForce actually has a problem with. So there we go. That's the plan for today. And yes, there's one other thing. Julia isn't here with me today this morning. She's at the doctor's, but she's just dropped me a message. She is about to come back. So maybe she'll join us as soon as she's done there, and then she'll join the chat as well. She may be even viewing live from the waiting room. Who knows? It's one of those things. We'll see. Let's get started in DAZ Studio, and oh yeah, let me also bring up my pointer here. I've got this pointer focus thing, don't I? That always comes in handy, pointer focus, if I only remember where I put it. That's this little orange overlay that we can see, that you can see my pointer better, my cursor better. And of course, I don't really remember where that is. Pointer focus, there we go. Shortcut on the desktop, sorts it right out. Oh yes, instead of Julia, and this is no reflection on her personality, of course, instead of Julia, I have a little friend running on my computer. It's a chatbot, and that has my name on it, J vs. Lewis, and it pops up some social links while we're doing this thing. It's just, in case you're not following me on the social media networks and you want to do that, then please go ahead and do that. I'll put an announcement out whenever I go live, so there we go. Let's start creating our flag there now, and I'll do that by selecting just a primitive here, either from this little icon here Or you can go out. That's the bot hard at work there. Very nice. Either from the little icon here, create a new primitive, a plain primitive. We need one for the floor, so I'm going to make one that's rather large, maybe 20 meters with just one division. That'll be enough, and that'll simulate our floor. Whoops, what happened there? That's not the right orientation. That's not what I meant to do. Or we can go ahead and create a primitive from here. Right, what I need to select is Y positive so that we have this thing lying flat on the floor. And it's important for that to happen because otherwise anything we simulate that drops to the floor may just go ahead and just fall right through it and keep falling forever. And we don't really want that. On top of that, we'll call that one floor. On top of that, we're going to create another primitive, and that's another plain primitive. This one doesn't have to be so big, so maybe we'll just make that 1 meter, and perhaps we're going to give it 50 divisions, and that's going to be our cloth for the flag. And this one I will create with Z positive because that means it'll come in slightly like 90 degrees rotated like so. I'm to be able to see the polygons here on my geometry, on my object, I've switched this over to the wire shaded viewport. If I'm in smooth shaded or even in texture shaded, I won't be able to see that. But if I change this over to wire shaded or wire texture shaded, then I'll be able to see all the geometry on the object. That noise that you're hearing there is actually a fire engine, I believe. They do that sometimes. It's rather annoying. Maybe I will close the door. Maybe I'll leave it open. One of those things. So with that object selected, I'm going to go and use my 3D manipulator tool and bring that up slightly further up. Let's not worry about the flag pole right now. That will be just a cylinder, a thin cylinder that I've put in there. So that's something that's easily doable. We might do that at the end, but for now we're just going to worry about. Yes, indeed, Rod. That's right. Something is getting hot. It's Florida, after all. You know, the Sunshine State and all that. We have wildfires even in the winter. To make it look more like a flag, I'm going to extend that out a little bit. So make that stretch that out a little bit, and that's that. So in order for this thing to simulate like we saw last time, we can either go ahead and head over to the edit menu. With our plane selected, we can head over to Object, Geometry, and then at the very bottom here we have Add dForce Modifier Dynamic Surface Add-on. And you can get it from there, and but that menu I've noticed is also available from the Simulation Settings tab. So if you don't have that tab open, head over to Window, Panes, and select Simulation Settings and dock that somewhere because we need to keep using it every once in a while. So I've docked that here, and I've docked that here, and with an object selected in the Scene tab, you can also go to this little context menu, and if you click that, there's also first of all there's Simulate and Clear Simulation here, but there's also under the dForce menu you can also add a dynamic surface from here. That's another little tip I've got there. I've forgotten. Have I done it now? I think I've done it, haven't I? Let me just have a look in the surface properties here. Yes, there's simulation there. Perfect. Okay. So that's got that on there. And oh yeah, but while we're talking about shortcuts and things that make dForce just that little bit more palatable, I've assigned a shortcut key to the Simulate button. And because I'm using Marvelous Designer as well, I'm used to the spacebar initiating the simulation. So if I press space, then dForce goes ahead and calculates that. And of course, the whole thing falls down to the floor and kind of crumbles there and dies a slow, painful death. At least that's what it looks like. So in order to do that, assign a shortcut key, you can head over here to Window and Workspace and Customize. Is that in the screen? Yeah, it's in Vision. Perfect. And if you do that, then this context menu, I believe they call it a modal dialog, comes up. And on the bottom here, you can now select under Simulation, you can add certain shortcuts here. Now, one thing to be mindful of, if this doesn't appear in this menu here, if you don't see simulation here, there is a trick that I've learned also last week while I was looking into this whole dForce thing. There is a trick that you can do, and it's one of those things that's kind of important. While new features are being added to DAZ Studio, they're usually also added to the default workspaces, but they are only updated when you actually go ahead and select that. So in under Window Workspace, you can select a layout, and if you were to select one of these things with a new version of DAZ Studio, it would come up with a new default configuration. So the dForce pane is something that would probably be part of that, but it's not something that's part of your layout, your particular perhaps customized layout, if you've been using DAZ Studio for a number of years, like it was in my case. So that's one implication. The other is that if you want to set up shortcuts like I've just shown you here in this menu, then some things may not show up until you head over to Window Workspace, Update and Merge Menus. And it doesn't really do anything detrimental. It just kind of merges new things that the DAZ developers have done and put them into your customized workspace. So if I do this now, there's just a dialog that runs and nothing appears to happen, yet certain things are coming up in the menu that weren't there before. So one of those things, I thought I'm going to share that tip with you. The dynamic surface modifier and the surface add-on. Do you mean, Biscuits, just do you mean when you say create modifier weight node, do you mean this one here? Or do you mean the one, do you mean the difference between this thing here and the way to edit it, to add it under edit object, geometry, dForce, dynamic surface? I don't think there is a difference. Those are the same things, but I'm not sure what you mean. If you could clarify that, maybe I know the answer. So then to go ahead and to paint the weight map and to make sure some parts of the object are not simulated, we head over to, what do we do again? Oh yes, yeah. We head over to create, let me show you this here, dForce modifier weight node. So that thing will actually add a new item into our scene. So if you do that and head over, well, there's some default options that you can do. Parent to selected item, which is what we're going to do. Here it is. That's what it now says. dForce modifier weight node 1. It's very presumptuous, as if we had several more coming up. So, you know, it's good to know. I'm also, while I'm up here, I'm just going to go and name that cloth, or flag, or whatever we want to do. So this creates a node here, and with that node selected, I can now add a map to it. So this is not the map itself, that's literally just the node. And in order to see what I'm doing there with the map, I need another tab open here, and that is the tool settings. It's currently not open anywhere, no. So let's bring that up. It's under Windows, Panes, and at the bottom here, there's tool settings. So if I open that, I'll dock it down at the bottom left here. This now lets me choose another tool that I need to select some of these polygons and add that map to it. So let's go ahead and switch that over to the node weight map brush. This same thing is also available from the tools menu, so you can select that tool itself by going over to tools, and there it is, node weight map brush. It's a very handy tool, does a lot of things, but you also need the tool settings to be able to see the things that this thing, you know, allows us to do. So with that dForce node thing selected here, I can now change my thing over to weight maps over here. So it was on locking, that's not what we need, or selection analysis. We need weight maps. Is that actually showing here? Perfect. And what I need to do now is select add map, and that will add a map to our object. If I do that, the whole object turns red. Now, before we continue and talk about how we can utilize that map in the best way possible, you may have noticed that there's also other things I can drop down from this menu, and this may be really interesting for clothing manufacturers because it allows you not only to add a stretch stiffness weights map to our object, which is what we're using now, and that's the thing that lets dForce simulate certain parts of the object and makes other parts not simulated. There's all kinds of other maps I can add and then paint individually. So instead of, say, defining a buckle as a material zone and then changing the properties on the dForce surface, you could also have a ready-made object and say this part is stiffer than that part, or this part has more buckling than that part. You know what I mean? This is one of those things that comes in handy. It's of course only specific to DAZ Studio, but it's one of those things that you can use. So for our purpose, it's going to be the stretch stiffness weights map that we need, and we can now go ahead and paint on this thing. If we are selecting the correct tool, actually we need to select the map. That's a bit of a shame. In my tests, there were some other bits and bobs that came up here. Maybe they've gone. Have they gone missing now? Have they gone? Oh yeah, look at that. That's fair. Oh, there we go. Paintbrush. Sorry. Select the paintbrush icon up here. This was the polygon selection mode, and we're going to come to that in a moment. So select the paintbrush tool, and with this option selected here, let's paint some polygons. And with that, if I now hover over my object, my little brush tool comes up. So it consists of a red outer circle. Can you see that all right here? There. It comes up with an outer circle, red, green inner circle, and the green thing is where we're actually painting, and then there's a bit of fall off to where the red circle is, and then outside of that, nothing is being painted. If I paint something on here now, it looks like nothing is happening. And that's because what I'm painting in with is already a value of 1. I'm kind of approximating a value of 1. I already have a value of 1 applied. So anything that's red means it's a value of 1. Anything that's gray on my map means it's a value of 0. And anything in between is kind of green, blue, yellow, that sort of thing. And if I wanted to take something away from that map now, I can press Alt and paint. Now, sadly, it doesn't quite work for me because I've mapped the Alt key to move my viewport around. So if you've also made that adjustment, then you can. There's a little workaround. You can click and drag first, and then press the Alt key on top of that, and then you'll start subtracting things from our map. So you can paint anything you like. You can also use a tablet if that makes your life easier, and if you let go of Alt and then keep painting, then you paint things in again. So blue is less than red and gray is less than blue, and that's how that works. There we go. You can also, if you hold Control down, that'll increase the size of the brush if you needed something bigger, and if you needed to increase the value, then you can increase the sensitivity here. So Control and roll your mouse button, that's the equivalent of playing with the inner and the outer radius values here. So that's that. Let me just show you how that affects our simulation. So if I just make sure I paint in this part in gray, and I go ahead and simulate my thing now, my flag, my piece of cloth, then we can see that anything that's gray is held in place, whereas everything else is kind of falling around that. So this is great to emulate something like a piece of cloth that's held up with a peg on a line or something, a line out to dry, or anything that you don't want to have simulated in your object. So with Control Z we can get rid of the whole map. With Clear we can get rid of the simulation there. And if I wanted to paint the kind of the two polygons on the side here, I can either go ahead and do something like that, which is, cumbersome and it's inaccurate and it's not really, I'll eventually get there, but it's not something that works great. So there's a more accurate way of selecting polygons with this thing as well, and that's the polygon selection tool. and that we get that over here. So currently I'm selecting this little brush with the P icon, that's the paint brush. The S is kind of the smoothing brush, and this thing here is the geometry selection. So if I select that, then I currently get nothing up there really, and that is because I can select individual polygons depending on what's selected here. If I right click, I can bring up the selection type. So it's either going to be a polygon selection, edge or vertex selection, which is the same as what we get here. That's the same. But there's also the selection mode. So marquee selection, lasso, and drag selection. Drag means you select, you select, usually polygons should now be selected. Of course it doesn't work because I'm demonstrating this now. So usually they all should turn this little kind of yellowish color here. That's at least the plan, which sadly doesn't work now that I'm trying it out on an object. Good thing is we don't need it anyway. I think we're better off with the marquee selection tool. So let's head over and go selection mode, marquee selection, and in order for us to drag a border around this and select appropriate polygons, the best thing to do is select the front view and then zoom in on the area that we need and go ahead and just drag that border around the first 2 lines of polygons here. There we go. That's the polygon selected, but that's not anything filled in on those. So my value is still 1 here. It's still red here. So in order for me to actually fill that in, I can go ahead and right click again and use the weight editing option down here and say fill selected. And if I do that, then a little menu comes up that lets me fill this with the value. So 100% would be red, 0% would be gray. And if we do that, I believe that's what we want to do. Then I can see underneath this there's things being grayed out here. If I go ahead and do that, zoom in and out, that's a bug, says Angel. When switch to drag selection for the tool, sometimes it won't recognize the function. But oh, thank you for letting me know. It's one of those things. In my rehearsals, it did work, and I was wondering why all of a sudden it just didn't, it didn't do the trick. So thanks. We're finding bugs everywhere. It is a beta version after all, but at the same time, that was already present before the beta. So yeah, definitely a bug. If we now go ahead and simulate this thing, we can see that where my flagpole is going to go, my flag isn't going to be simulated. So that's exciting news. That's almost what I want. It's not exactly, whoops, it's sorry about that, not being full screen there. It's almost what I want. It's not exactly what I want because the flag is kind of hanging down now, and I think what flag manufacturers do when you have little kiddie flags or whatever, they put something like a stiffness thing at the top of the flag so that it kind of, I guess the people who planted the US flag on the moon, they would have probably done that, because otherwise either it would just over time would probably just fall down. It would never just display as a flag hanging there. So in order to do that, we can just paint more on our map and give it a slightly lesser value than 0, or slightly higher value than 0 on the top of the flag. Let's see if I can do that. Let's clear the animation out again so that we see our polygons. And once again, I can now select maybe the first 2 or 3 polygons here. I might do that looking at it from the front, and use my polygon selection tool again, just drag that around here. And with that selected, I'm going to head over to weight editing, fill selected. And in this case, let me try, so 100 would be too stiff. I think maybe I'll try something less, maybe like 90. Let me try that and see what happens if we simulate that. It's better. It's getting there. The flag doesn't completely fall down to the flagpole there. So I think I need something slightly less even, something along the lines of, I don't know, maybe 75. Let me try that. Maybe I can do that even from here. Yeah, there we go. Fill selected with something like, I'll try 75-ish, and we'll see what happens there. You end up zooming in and out or rotating the view, and that kind of makes this functional again. Is that how it works? Angel? Yes, so that was not that was too much. Also, I don't think that was. Hang on, let's just try this again. I was distracted there. That's too much almost. I want the flag to just fall a little bit more. So let me just go ahead and clear that again and go ahead and do weight editing, fill selected, and let's try 80 something, 80, 85 maybe. So it's kind of a trial and error, what works best. And that's kind of what I like. This is the effect that I like. Great, so that's our flag. It behaves appropriately. I've simulated not the animation. I believe I've simulated the. We used timeline slider. Okay, that was good of me, wasn't it? So I thought I had set this to current frame. So no, I didn't. I actually had the timeline selected because now I can select which part of my flag I'd like to use in a still image, and then just dial my timeline to that and say, hey, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. So this is another interesting tip from Biscuits there. Thank you so much for letting me have that. That was a very nice idea. If you were to make a still picture and you're simulating other items in the scene, and you think, yeah, I'm kind of happy with my flag now at this position, and I want that to be a static object. So basically, I'd like for this to be rather a morph on my object rather than this being an active simulation, because I may have characters that I need to simulate in that scene. You can save this out as an OBJ in this position and then go ahead and import that back to the unsimulated object with Morph Loader. So that's another interesting tip, and I've tried that. I was mildly successful with it, not always successful with things. So if let me switch off the floor. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it works. So I can switch off the floor, that only the selected objects are being exported here. If you do have a subdivision surface modifier applied to this object, by the way, then it's a good idea to go under mesh resolution and make sure that is switched off. So I don't have that modifier applied now, but if I had, I'd have a selection here of base and high resolution. So make sure you're going back into base so that you don't export the high resolution morph. Then head over either to this icon here, that's the export file option, or you head over to file export. Give it a name. Test will probably do a good job there. Already exists. Perfect. Let's overwrite it and select the DAZ Studio preset here. It will by default write the textures out as well. You can leave that on. You can switch it off. It's up to you. Hit accept, and now we can clear the animation. Maybe even park that slider on the first frame here, and with our cloth still selected, we can probably also get rid of the modifier weight node and the map altogether. We don't really need that anymore. But with our cloth object selected, we can now go ahead and import the file. Oh no, actually it's not import, sorry, it's under edit. So there we go, it's under edit, object, Morph Loader Pro or Advanced. Either will work fine. Let's go with Morph Loader Pro here. And on this menu, make sure you select the same preset that you've had before, so DAZ Studio will work fine. Under here, under preset, there's choose morph files, and if you select that, then you can select your morphed OBJ, and if you open that, hit accept, what we should be seeing is loading morph test, created morph successfully. That's always good when that happens. I'm always a little bit I'm ambivalent when that doesn't happen. So there we go. With the object selected under parameters, you now have a morphs dial here, and with that, it's called test. You can rename that, of course, and with that you can now crank that up, and that'll morph that flag into whatever it was before. I'm not entirely sure why it goes ahead and moves the object as well. That's not really what I had expected. I can only surmise it was because I have moved my plane from the original position originally when I created that. There's usually in 3D modeling applications, there is a way to apply what's it called in Blender again? It's called apply transformations and rotations. So that means if I create an object, it's created dead in the center of the scene. If I then move it or apply anything like stretching or whatnot to it, that is a non-zero value, and these values ideally should be 0. So there's a way to apply this. Because it was a primitive, I guess it hasn't done that, so usually it would remain in the same position. It hasn't worked in my demonstration, but if you create a 3D object in a modeling application and then apply those transformations, rotations and transformations and scaling and all that, then that shouldn't happen. And you can literally just create a morph that'll dial in and just create that simulation in here, and now you can literally simulate other objects. So that's that's funky. One final thing I wanted to show you briefly to finish this off. I've got I've in my animation there. So yeah, I've basically rendered, I think, a 120 or so frame animation for this, and that's what it then looked like. And this was just a cylinder here, so that's easy to create there. But just to explain quickly how I put my logo on there. Again, this is not something that is difficult, but it's another tip I thought I'd pass along, because if this was a properly UV mapped object, then I would have a proper texture with that. I didn't have that in this case. I literally just picked something from my library that happened to be a square logo, and of course it didn't quite fit on it. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go to my I'm going to go over to my texture shaded view here, and this is where you can now see that I don't actually have a subdivision modifier on here. Maybe we should put that on, and we get possibly that's possible, Biscuits. Yeah, it could be a different frame. The one thing that is common with bringing morphs in, and then there's a kind of a morph creation error that DAZ Studio brings up. That's usually down to the fact that you've saved the object out in high resolution rather than in regular resolution, and then sometimes the geometry, I don't know, freaks out or changes. It shouldn't, but it does, and it's one of those things. If we do add one under edit object geometry, convert to sub D, that'll make our object a lot smoother. So just to tell you what happens under the hood there, it doesn't actually add more polygons to the object, it will create them on the fly, so they're kind of implied. So under the hood, the object itself isn't changed, but everywhere where there is a square polygon, DAZ Studio now goes ahead and applies this and says, hey, I'm gonna subdivide that into 4 polygons. One polygon is divided into 4, and that means there's more rounding that can be applied on the fly. And you can set that under I believe it's general notice display, isn't it? Where is that now? Oh, mesh resolution. There we go. So high resolution, that's the slider I wanted to show you earlier. Slider is base and high resolution. If I switch that back to base, then you can see we don't see that now. And if I switch that to high resolution, we do see that now. In rendering, you can crank that up. You can even, in the view, you can also crank that up to show more implied polygons and to get a really smooth effect there. I'll switch that back to the default, which is just one kind of subdivision iteration there. But back to my logo there. If I, with the cloth selected, if I head over to my surface properties, under default there's base, and in base currently I only have a color. So I can add any kind of image to that, and my image is in fact a square image just with my logo on it. Somewhere here, I believe. Is that graphics? Maybe this one here. There, and it's kind of actually it works okay. I can probably get rid of the morph for now, just so that we get to see this in its unmodified stage. Well, it actually does work. That's kind of cool. I didn't think it was going to work. Sometimes you see things creeping in at the top and at the bottom, and you want to maybe stretch that out. I mean, my logo is kind of now stretched out. It was supposed to be for a square map here, and to change that, that's also under surface properties, under the surfaces tab, under geometry. You can find several things, and one of those is the horizontal tiles horizontal, vertical tiles and the offset for those. So sometimes when you apply a shader and your object isn't the right size, like a leather shader, for example, you see that the leather pattern is so huge that you think, oh yeah, it is a leather pattern, but it's just too big. So in order to make that smaller, you can just have more tiles. So if I were to increase my tiles, that will also increase how many times that logo is being repeated on here. So I could do that and then do this. This is the offset. Vertical works the same way, so I could do this if I wanted to. And then the same thing with the offset, so I can literally do that. I believe these sliders are also animatable. If you want to create a slot machine, then this is your chance to do it with surface properties. So yes, that's how you can do it. And so if I wanted to have my logo absolutely square, let me just reset those properties here. I could say I'll do this. This is kind of more what my logo looks like. And now I can kind of use the offset to make sure it's in the middle. It's not going to be absolutely perfect, because really I'd need a properly UV mapped object for that, and that DAZ Studio can't do that. It applies default UVs, but they're, as soon as I stretch the object, those UVs will look pans. There we go. I thought I just wanted to bring that to your attention. This is where you can mess around with that, because it does come in handy with leather shaders and stuff like that. So that is what I've learned with these maps. And one other thing that I thought would be of interest, that perhaps we're going to create a brand new object for that, is the fact that I wanted to look into these magnets and create somewhat of a functionality that I wanted to basically have an object, a dForce object, that rather than apply the dForce properties to it and then letting that object simulate in one place, I wanted the object to move while it's simulating. So example is, you have a bed and somebody wants to pull over a sheet over themselves. So rather than let the sheet drop down onto the person, because that's not really how reality works, you would probably get into bed and then you would kind of pull on the duvet and pull it over you. I would like for the cloth to kind of go over whatever it's pulling over, and I was partially successful with that. Yes, I think you can. Yeah, I haven't tried it out myself, but I believe you can. Maybe maybe we should try that out, Angel. See if I've told the truth or not. Let me create a brand new scene here. Well, not brand new scene. I'm going to leave the floor as it is. I'm going to bring one primitive in, and I'll go ahead and make that a sphere, perhaps. And with the sphere, with my 3D manipulator tool, with the sphere selected, I'm going to go and bring that over. Oh yeah, okay. Let me do that again, actually, because I think my sphere just needs to be Y positive as well. Yeah, there we go. That's much better. So that's my sphere, and I'm going to create a piece of cloth again that I'd like to drag over there while it simulates. So let's see how we can do that. Create another plane, and maybe give it 50 divisions again. Make that a bit, maybe make that 2 meters in size. And that is now so flat on the floor we can't even see it. In fact, everything is gray. Let me change that as well. I'm going to go and perhaps make that a little bit larger. And for us to be able to actually see that, I'll go ahead and apply a different color to that. Maybe a blue. There we go. So we know that the blue thing is our cloth. Call it cloth. And started maybe here, slightly above the ground, slightly away from the sphere. So ideally, let me just select a keyframe here. Let's see if we can do this in 60 frames. Thank you, Biscuits. I was wondering, it just gets rid of a little bit of clutter here. It does mean I have to use 2 webcams for it, because if I cut to the other webcam in full screen, then that circle would still be applied. So, but it's cool. I've got 2 webcams, so that'll work. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate that. Very nice of you. If we go ahead and make a keyframe here on my animation, boom. Then ideally what I want is if I move my slider to frame 30, then ideally what I want on frame 30 to happen is I want that cloth to be here now, perhaps a little bit rotated, a little bit further up. So yeah, like that, perhaps even a little bit further over here. And ideally what I'd like to see now during the dForce simulation is that the sphere is kind of bulging out and the material is being dragged there. So that's my ideal, that's what I'd like to see, that's my ideal outcome. So in kind of where I'm coming from, I thought it's easy enough to go and select my cloth and go ahead and add a dForce. Oh, this is what you mean, right, Biscuits? The dynamic surface and the dynamic surface add-on. That's what you're asking, what the difference between those is. I don't actually know. That's a very good question. RG Cincy probably does know, and he probably has mentioned it in his very wonderful and extensive documentation there. I'll put a link to that in the description. I believe it's already there. It's phenomenal. He's written 3 PDFs, and one of my viewers last time has brought that to my attention. He saved 2 of those out. I found them on the DAZ forum, and RG Cincy has made those available for all of us. So he's been playing around with dForce a lot, and I believe somebody's even made some video tutorials with him. You can purchase them on the DAZ website. So, but the information is all there, and it's just a matter of reading through this, and I will certainly do that. dForce is such a fascinating topic. I'm sure he knows the difference between static, dynamic, and dynamic surface add-on. Because I've only ever used dynamic surface. I don't even know what the static surface is. So I don't know. Maybe we'll find out together. Let me know. So I'm going to add a dynamic surface modifier to this. And again, the slider moves. That's all good. I've got my my duration for the simulation set to use the timeline play range, so that's also good. But I've noticed that when I hit simulate, the timeline slider moves across now, and it kind of does what it's supposed to do. The manipulator gadget moves in the right direction, but my piece of cloth just stays in place and just falls to the ground. And that's not really what I want. And I didn't really understand why that's happening, because my expected behavior is that, sure, simulate whatever you must simulate, but also move the thing the way I had just moved it. So I don't really know why that happened. But then I started playing with these weight maps, and I've noticed that as soon as we apply a map to this, the thing actually moves. So that's very exciting stuff. So let's see if we can make that happen again. So with my cloth selected here, we head over to create dForce modifier weight node, and add that node. That's perfect. And once again, under tool settings, let's go ahead and switch over back to the node weight map brush, and that will allow us to add the map to it. Now it turns red, and I think I don't even have to draw on it. All I need to do is now simulate this thing again, and it will indeed move now. No, see, it doesn't move. What a shame. So I do have to draw something on there. Okay, fine. We can do that. We know how that works. We can try that. Okay, if I clear the simulation, it actually moves properly into place. How bizarre. But this is not bad actually, because now that we know how to draw on a surface like that, on a map like that, we can just go ahead and select our paintbrush tool here, and with that map selected, we can head over and just imagine this is the piece where, I don't know, somebody was maybe pulling on it. Maybe we'll put these things. Oh, Angel, thank you so much. That is really exciting. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. $12 in super chat. You're the man. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. This is, yes, absolutely. The next coffee is on you. The next pound of coffee is on you. Thanks. It's already in here. And it's also halfway down to me buying that dForce Magnets product as well. Very cool. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. Loving that. So as soon as I head over and try and paint something here, once again, I just go and maybe this is hand number 1 here. And this is here, maybe hand number 2. Whoops. Hello. See, this is that bug again, isn't it, Angel? This is exactly what you were talking about. Now the brush is kind of going away. What's happening here? You said, what did you say works? Switch to drag selection for the tool. Sometimes it won't recognize. Great. Okay, let's go into drag selection. Mode into drag selection, and then go and oops, not smooth brush, actually paintbrush. Does this do the trick? Selection type. Sorry, mode. Oh, terrible. What do I do? What do I do? Do I need to maybe change to a different tool, and then back to the node weight map brush? Say that 3 times fast. That's not easy, is it? Well, for some bizarre reason, my brush is just not coming back, and I don't really know why that is. That's odd, isn't it? That's definitely Bug City here. I had just expected I could just keep moving around and keep brushing more stuff on it. Zoom in and out with the mouse wheel, you mean, or with this? No. Crazy stuff. I suppose saving and opening it again, that would maybe work. But yeah, it's just bizarre that this thing just doesn't come back. Well, I guess for this demonstration, at least I was able to paint one circle, even though it's not quite the circle that I wanted to paint. But if I head over and try and simulate this object, the thing again, now you'll see that the cloth is actually moving. Not quite where I wanted it to move, so obviously I want the cloth to be going over the sphere rather than next to it. But I guess we can kind of see that this is almost working. Sometimes the cloth appears to get stuck into the object that it goes next to. So in this case, these vertices, they get stuck. So one way around it is to make sure that the cloth properties are set so that they're extremely thin, so that they almost behave like silk. So the friction properties. Let's see if we can do that on the surface. Geometry. No, that's not what we want. Oops, sorry. Just meant to close a few of these things down. Head over to simulation, and here we have the friction property. So the default is set to 0.4, and I believe if we make that really, really low, like 0.001, yep, I'll do that in a minute. That's a good idea. No, Rod, it happens to all of us, and I think that's kind of refreshing to see that everyone's working with the same tools. And in Germany, we say everybody always boils water. I think that's it. Christina, what do we say? Jeder kocht nur mit Wasser. Everyone only ever boils water. That's what we say. And I guess what we mean by that is everyone who's using the same tools will always get the same outcome. So yeah, that's one of those things. DAZ have actually, I've reported a couple of bug reports to them once a few years ago, and they did watch them several times, in fact, and they have actually corrected some of the bugs. So I think one was it had to do with lights. When you bring in a parametric light and then you switch rendering engines, I believe then the light properties didn't get amended. So I told them that, and they amended it. So it's very, very good to know. So they are actually interested in bug reports, unlike people like Apple who couldn't care less. So good for you, DAZ. Good for you. Let's see if we can simulate this thing properly here. Artie, thank you so much. You're very welcome for my tutorials. That is really cool. I appreciate every dollar. This is exciting. Artie, you're the man. Can we get to $25 today? That would be so cool. If that's the case, I'm going to buy that dForce Magnets products instantly, and I'm going to show you how that works in the next live stream. How's that? Very cool. Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Artie. Awesome stuff. Now let's try out. Angel was suggesting if I go back to my weight bracket. Oh, look at that. Yeah, absolutely. So just switching over to something else, it has already done the trick. So excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Let's see if we can just paint a little bit more over here. And imagine this is how somebody would pull their duvet over their head or something. Let's see if that works. Friction properties amended. Geometry amended. Simulation. Boom. Let's do this thing. That goes over here, and you look at that. Look at that. So this is exactly the effect that we want. Obviously, you know, slightly longer duvet, I guess, and also slightly thinner sphere perhaps. But in essence, that's exactly how I had envisioned this. Perhaps I can even on frame 30 with the 3D manipulator thing selected again. Well, actually, universal tool selected again. I think what I'd like to do, let me just go and clear that simulation out. I think I'd like for the cloth to not kind of point up. I'd like for it to be more flat there. So I'll go and maybe, whoops, with the cloth selected, not the weight map selected. I like to go and do this there. Let's see what happens now if we simulate this thing again. There we go. You can kind of see where this is going, and I believe this is in essence how magnets actually work as well. But with our weight map brush, say that 3 times fast. With that weight map brush, and of course the damaged kind of geometry that we can see here as well. That doesn't look healthy. But I suppose as soon as we put a subdivision surface modifier on there, maybe it'll just do the trick. There's also the big advantage of the magnets, I guess, is that you can't just select the whole plane and move the whole plane like I did in my simulation. If I clear that out again, all I could really do was move this manipulator thing from here to there. But what I couldn't do is move one part over to the left and one part over to the right. So that's something that was not possible. And I guess magnets make that possible. But again, because it's a script, there's got to be some kind of trickery involved that allows us to bind a helper object to a piece of the geometry that we're dealing with. So that's that. I hope this made sense the way I explained this. There's one other thing. Yeah, we do have a bit of time, don't we? Yeah, we do have a bit of time. Let's keep going for a bit and look into this exploding geometry thing that I've mentioned, because it's one of those things that, again, by making sure you are careful with placing your animations, you may be able to go ahead and create the desired effect that you want. So like exploding geometry usually happens when before you start the simulation, something goes and is intersecting with what you're simulating. So if that happens, then something similar to my earlier picture happens here when we said where was it? Getting organized is on high on my list of things. Was it in pics? Yeah, there we go. This exploding geometry thing here. This happens if you have something like a hand intersecting with the geometry that you're trying to simulate, and then it just blows up in your face. So Biscuits, thank you so much for your donation. I appreciate that. Biscuits, that is so cool. It is awesome. It is awesome to get donations like that on an ongoing basis. I think this is the most successful day that we've ever had. This is super cool. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Maybe I should get a kind of a tip jar that has a counter on it, what the accumulated amount is, and then we'll go and buy a product from that for next week's live stream. This would be so cool. That's a great thing. I'm going to look into that. I've got the bot running, and I think with this bot integration, I think I can do more things, like, you know, put funky graphics up on the screen, and you know, we'll see where this is going. I love that you guys love it. It's working for me. If it's working for you, awesome stuff. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate that. So let's see how we can avoid that from happening and turn it into something like this instead. I'm going to go and not so much create a brand new scene. I'm just going to go and get rid of my sphere and my cloth object and bring in another object. In this case, let's go ahead and make it smooth shaded and bring in a cube that our lady can sit on, or our character can sit on. 1 meter, maybe a little bit too big. We'll see if we'll see how that goes. I'm going to bring in a character, maybe whoever appears to be at the top of my Smart Content tab, which is Alexandra, Genesis 8 character. I believe, is she an original DAZ character? I believe so. Yes, I believe so. older women and curvier women are both having a lot more success on DAZ than they ever had. Good that DAZ have realized that there's not just the perfect supermodel figure available. So let's make that cube a little bit smaller, and with Alexandra selected, we're going to go and leave the cube in that position, but Alexandra I'm going to move forward, slightly forward to the cube. So we're going to adjust the cube size there in a moment once we get her into a sitting position. This week's Platinum Club freebie was, of course, the retro Ruffles. Oh, Rod, it's this little dollar icon at the bottom of the chat. And if you're either on YouTube in the desktop interface or on the mobile version on Android or on iOS, they both have this icon there. And all you need to do is add your credit card or PayPal account, I believe, to YouTube. And then you can pick an amount. There's a little slider in the mobile interface that lets you pick how much you want to give. You can usually associate a message with that, and that message is then going to stand out in the chat. And as soon as you click it, I'll get about 50-60% of that. That's how the YouTube thing works. So there's a bit of transaction fee involved, but yeah, that's basically how it works. Give it a go. I'd love to have you on board. So we'll position Alexandra a little bit in forward here in front of the cube, and we're going to do that because well, actually this needs to be this. I need to delete that keyframe that's here on frame 30. I didn't know we were on frame 30. Sorry, big mistake. That easy mistake to make. Make sure when you're doing your setup in an animation, you're on frame 0 to do that, because otherwise it's nasty results. So we have something on frame 30 that can't be deleted. Let's go to frame 0 and make sure that our lady is standing in front of it, like so. And the idea then is that on frame 30, I'm going to go ahead and apply a pose in which she is sitting down. Let me see if I have a pose here for her. I don't really have many poses from, I've got this one here. I've got, is there something here? That could be Genesis 8 pose. This is a good pose here. This is perhaps not very ladylike. Maybe this one here, this one or that one. Let's have this one here. Cool, so on frame 30, I'm applying that pose, and I'm going to move that character over to the cube. So, she's not quite sitting right on the cube, but that's not a problem. We're just going to make the cube a bit smaller. Easy. Oops, that's Alexandra selected. Need to select the cube, and then go either I can make the cube smaller or just less tall. Perhaps I'll just make it less tall. I've seen something on the DAZ forums, and this could be interesting. I'm going to experiment with that. This is something that's always annoyed me about 3D figures, that when they sit down, like this is a perfect example there, if the cube would be slightly higher. This is kind of simulating a proper sitting pose, but really we have two geometries intersecting with one another, and that's really not how life works, is it? We're all squishy, so if I do this, there's not my thumb isn't intersecting with another geometry here. It's pushing it in, so one geometry moves the other. Julia is probably gonna. She said she's already done. She's doing some blood work now. She's at the doctor, so it went extremely quickly. She is on her way back. So as soon as she's here, she'll probably be Julia and the bot. So that's the plan going forward. That we have Julia and the bot. Come on, we can do this. We can do this. Bring the woman back and bring more humans back. That's the spirit. So what I would love to see implemented at one point is, of course, that when I put a figure down on another piece of geometry, I would like her muscle here to squish in. And there have been people on the DAZ forums who've been trying that out, and I'm dying to try this myself. So apply a surface modifier, dForce modifier to this part of her geometry, and then let it simulate and see if that works. Maybe a little bit of trickery involved, but that's my ultimate goal. That's my ultimate plan. Make 3D figures look even more realistic. For now, we're going to have to settle for this, and this is a good pose here. So now my animation looks something obviously not like that, because I didn't press select the keyframe on the first frame. So she needs to be in a standing position when she's in front of it. Let me see. Do we have that? We don't really have a standing position. We can probably get away with this one here. Oh, applied that to the cube. That's obviously not going to work, is it? So there we go. There. Sometimes what may work is to zero the pose. That may work sometimes, but not always. So we have her sitting herself down like that. And it's important that she does that because when we give her a dForce ready outfit, then that outfit needs to be simulated so that it kind of moves with her back onto the chair, and then she moves on top of that. The reason why I'm showing you this pose is that I'm expecting her hand to intersect with the clothing item that we're going to use, which is the retro ruffles. Let's go on to frame 0 and see if we can do that. I believe that's also in here under wardrobe. Retro ruffles, there we go, that's the product. We're going to apply the full dress. And in an ideal world, when we hit simulate, I see it may not actually happen now because the dress isn't I think her hands are not intersecting with it. Okay, maybe we'll go ahead and do a different pose then, something that that will probably cause an explosion. That's kind of what I'm after right now. Something that will definitely. This is probably going to turn limits. I'm always ambivalent about leave limits on, turn them off. Perhaps leave them on there. So that's on frame 30 now. So this may potentially cause an explosion. I don't know. It probably doesn't. It probably doesn't now. But let's see what happens. We'll see what happens. Let's get rid of the Ruffles dress and adjust her position so that she's kind of sitting like that on the cube. There. Let's just see what happens from here to there. If we do get any clothing explosions. Oh, also, somewhat of an important point to save your scene every once in a while. Let's see. Exploding dForce. It's one of those things. This is just bound to go wrong at one point. Okay, cool, Biscuits. Thank you so much for dropping by. I will tell Julia that you were missing her, and I hope she's going to be back next time. Thank you so much for dropping in. Thanks for your donation. Thanks for being such a loyal supporter. I really appreciate that. And thank you for all your dForce tips this week. Bye. See you soon. Let's see what happens when we simulate this thing. So far, so good. Oh yeah, there's one thing, I don't know, I can change this now. There is an option in the simulation settings that that you can switch off. So right now what dForce is doing, it simulates the cloth in the first position, on the standing position. And that's often not necessary. If the clothing item is already kind of in the correct position, you don't have to use that, and that makes this process a little bit quicker. So right now it's simulating the cloth on the standing figure, and I believe it's zeroing the figure out a little bit as well. And then in the second part, it's now moving through my animation and then kind of simulating every frame gradually there. But the first part is actually not necessary, and I'll show you an option in a moment where to switch that off if you don't need it. Let's see, are you going to explode or not? If it doesn't happen, I'll still show you how to avoid that in your scenes. Oh yeah, there we go, dForce explosion at its best. Or RT ruffle dress, who knows, maybe we should sell that as a morph for $12.95. An idea, isn't it? Yeah, so then also with exploding geometry, usually what happens is that this now just takes forever. So first of all, we know that this is not what we want, so we can kind of stop the simulation there. Eventually, dForce may come up with an error, so I will go ahead and leave it running. Perhaps we will run into this error, and I can go ahead and show you where to find what dForce is trying to tell you there. It's usually not something we understand because we're humans and that's a machine, so but hey, we can try to decipher alien messages from another dimension, perhaps. We get the picture. Perhaps I'm just going to hit the big cancel button and see if we can avoid that from happening. Sometimes the error even pops up after the cancel. So I think what dForce is trying to do is always, once you hit cancel, it's always trying to finish the current iteration of whatever it is that it's doing. Renders behave the same way. You click the cancel button and then only after 30 seconds or so, hey, there we go, error during simulation. See log for details. That's, yeah. We'll get right on that, shall we? So this is the error message that we're frequently getting when we simulate that. One of those things. You can just click OK, but it's important that if you want to look at that error message, don't do anything else now. Don't simulate it again. Don't render anything. So the log can be investigated under the help section under troubleshooting. And there's view log file. And I don't know how familiar you are with computer logs. They are basically just a text file, and these text files get amended to over time. So there's a command that tells you, I have text output here, something's happened, I've been rendering XYZ iterations, and every time some text output happens, the program goes ahead and says, okay, this is the log file, I'm going to find the end, and I'm going to put another line on the bottom, I'm going to close the file. That's how computers write log files, and these files grow over time. Eventually they can grow up to like gigabytes in size. I have servers running in the cloud in which I regularly have to make sure these log files don't grow too big, because they can eat up quite a bit of space there. So it's okay to clean that out every once in a while. DAZ is very harmless there, but if you've had your DAZ installation for a number of years, then it's a good idea to every once in a while to just either archive it or clear it out. So if you click that, then depending on your operating system, a text editor opens displaying this. So in my case, I'm using the regular text edit here, and this gives you, this is each of these lines is one output. It usually starts with when it happened, so date and time when it happened, and what service on the computer did it, or in our case, what type of the program wants to tell you something. So in this case, it's IRA. It's an info, otherwise it'll be an IRA error or whatever, and it'll tell you something cryptic, and then if you're lucky, it'll tell you what is actually involved. So sometimes things like, I didn't find a texture, for example, at the following path, and then you can say, hey, that's because that was on a network drive and I've removed that drive, or my E drive is now called my D drive or something, and that's why that gives you a little clue of what happened there. So if we scroll to the very bottom of the file, because we haven't done anything, we get to see let me zoom in there so that you get to see this in its full glory here. Can't make that smaller. That's bad, isn't it? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Works now. So if I scroll to the bottom of that file, I can see that we're getting a warning here. So these are now, I guess this is the date. This is right now 11:07 and 12 seconds and milliseconds as well. Spring 830, 931 of node retro ruffles panty extended. Rest length is now smaller than the collision offset, which is whatever. And it does that literally for every iteration here, for every pixel that it's simulating, which is kind of interesting that we're getting that output. And I guess at one point it'll just tell you the shortest spring had a length of whatever this is. This is the end of our iteration, so we hit the cancel button. Already it was kind of finishing this iteration, and it says warning, whatever DAZ open kernel factory.cpp open cl notify cl out of resources error. So I guess my geometry took up so much memory that my GeForce GTX 970 couldn't handle it anymore, and I guess that's why eventually we stopped with an error. And this is the error. So if ever you need to get in touch with a developer, with a vendor about a product not working, this is where you can find that. So it's also about rendering. So if you had a rendering issue, you hit render and you get a blank picture or something, then you can consult this log and you can have a look at why this has happened. Maybe it gives you some clues of what went on there. But enough of logging and hacking and all that. So this is, no, don't save that. Don't do that. That's okay there. We wanted to avoid this error from happening, I believe, and I'm glad I chose this pose. We know whereabouts this error happened, and I believe it happened. We can probably just go one frame further. It happened when her hand started intersecting with the geometry here. So had the skirt, or the dress, the skirt here, been on the outside of her at all times, that wouldn't have been the problem. But because her arm goes and digs into the geometry more and more, we're having this issue of explosion. And that is kind of a key to avoiding it as well. So if we know the end position, I'll just have to get rid of that dress because I really don't see what else is going on here. I just need to make sure that it happens with her underpants as well. So can't really help with that because I don't think anything is intersecting at that point, at this point. Not that I can see it anyway. So what we can do though is avoiding this intersection with keyframe adjusting. We've already got our final keyframe, so we know that this position is going to be working out. So if we add other keyframes in it, so for example here, then we can go ahead and whoops, that's not what I meant. We can take her arm, for example, and just move that up, and perhaps move that out as well. Oops. And when I do that right here, oh, hang on. Is that the, oh, that's the bend, is the, oh, that we can't do that, we need to do it on the shoulder, I guess. Yeah, we can do that. And while I'm fiddling here on this position, we can see that DAZ Studio is automatically creating a keyframe here. Can you see that, where that little black dot is? This is now where DAZ is creating a keyframe. So rather than what happened before, that the hand is intersecting with the geometry, it'll lift itself up here and then go ahead and we're going to gently, hopefully, place it on the bottom here. It's only a matter of trial and error. We can probably go ahead and in frame 15 make sure that the arm is still a little bit, oops, it's a little bit higher up, so that when the skirt settles here, we don't want the hand to go in now. So if it goes now, then it would maybe just gently drag the skirt down from the outside, but that shouldn't be an issue. Sometimes when that happens too fast, that can be a problem. But you know, so this is, let's see what that looks like if we go and make that dress visible again and try and simulate that again. Preparing objects to simulate already has an error. Well, that's clever, isn't it? Let's go and clear the animation. Whoops. So sorry, I didn't go to full screen then. Sorry. It could well be, Rod, that geometries intersecting with one another has something to do with it. Yeah, you see, I'm now getting this error for good here, and I'm not entirely sure why. There's also the starting position that her hand is already intersecting with this, so maybe on frame 1 I can go ahead and lift that arm, oops, lift that arm out as well. Maybe I should do that here as well. There, something like that. Just make sure this doesn't intersect too much with it. I'm not entirely sure why I'm getting this error, but it's one of those things that's totally dForce dependent. What I found works with this, you just hit save and either reload the scene. Maybe I'll just go and try that. Let's go and try and restart DAZ Studio and see if that works. If it doesn't work, what will probably work is remove the dress from the character, be on frame 0, remove the dress from the character, put it on again, and then try simulating again. Then maybe dForce likes that a little bit better. It's one of those things. It is all about trial and error in this crazy hobby of ours. Exploding dForce. Let's see if we can bring it back. My wife has just come home, so this is nice. We have Julia back. Give her a moment to settle in, and then you know, say hello in the chat while we simulate Alexandra here. There we go. So that certainly did the trick. I can just go ahead and hit simulate, and now things work fine. Let's see what happens, shall we? And let's keep our fingers crossed that this is showing that the geometry does no longer explode. If it does, of course, you know, then it's not so good. But you get the picture. So if you do a simulation and you have a look at your starting pose, which is usually the A pose or another standing pose, and you have a look at your end pose, just scrub the slider gently through the timeline and see how the pose is interpolating. Because really what's happening there from one pose to another, much like with Puppeteer and with all these other things, the program doesn't look at is this physically possible or not? It just moves vertices from one position to another. And if it doesn't do what a real human being would do, then go ahead and identify these positions and add extra keyframes with new positions on those keyframes, and just move an arm out of the way before it goes and settles in, so that nothing moves through another part of geometry and all that. It's looking good so far. Hello, how's it going? Did you give blood? My wife is so brave, she gave blood, and let's just hope that the results are good when they come back. There we go. Rod says hi. Okay, looks like we're settling in okay. Rod says hello. And people were missing you in the chat. Just wanted to relay that. So that's good news here. I think a champagne cork is in order. We have managed to make dForce dress retro ruffles not explode, so that's very exciting. And yeah, it's all just down to making sure the character does not interact with that too much. So it's gently pushing down on it like that. That's okay. You can see that when she rests her hand in her lap, she pushes down the skirt a little bit, and that was fine for dForce. Up to a point. We can see some geometry artifacts here. That's totally fine. No explosions, exactly. And that is fine. So if she pushes her hand down ever so slightly onto fabric, that's okay. But I think if it's kind of a major intersection, I think then dForce has an issue. It's not actually just dForce that has a problem with that. Marvelous Designer frequently explodes clothes as well. Usually not when you've made it with patterns directly in Marvelous Designer, but certainly when you bring in objects into Marvelous Designer and turn them into cloth objects. There we go. I believe that was it for today. I think that was all. Oh, actually, I do have one piece of super exciting news that I just wanted to share with you, because it made me smile when I found that out. So it is about Adobe and Photoshop. So a big piece of news here. After over 30 years of Photoshop being around, Adobe have finally changed the default behavior for scaling up images on your canvas. So before that, what you had to do is you had to hold Shift down and then drag one of the corners on your canvas or on your layer for the proportions to be constrained. So if you had a 16:9 image and you didn't want to change its aspect ratio, which is like 99% of the time you didn't want to do that, you just wanted to make it bigger or smaller, you had to hold down Shift. And they've changed that default behavior now, that without holding down Shift, it constrains the proportions. And if you hold down Shift, then you can mess with the proportions again. So that's one of those things. It's also very, very exciting stuff that you've had that now, again, after 30 years, there's this thing about Photoshop that you have a regular undo function now. So Control Z or Command Z on your keyboard usually undid the last step, but if you wanted to go back 2 or 3 steps, like implemented by every software on the planet, Photoshop did it differently, because that's what Adobe are like, aren't they? So there we go. And they've now changed that as well. It's a new undo behavior, they say. So it just made me smile when I saw that and thought, hey, that's great. That's where that creative cloud money goes. My friends, thank you so much. Exactly, with 2019, that's exactly right. And it's just driving me crazy every time. I now have to kind of relearn Photoshop. It's probably good when new people join Photoshop, but it's just crazy for those of us who've been using it for a few years. My friends, thank you so much for joining me. I have a plan, and I'll see if I put it into action. No, I will actually put it into action. Let's just put it into action. I know that you guys like these streams. I like these streams as well. And I want to follow up on a suggestion that I've heard there last week by a viewer. I'm so sorry, I've forgotten your name now. But he said we should have a community like this. And we should have a community. And if ever we find something that we want to post or that we want advice on, and we don't want to go to the DAZ Studio forum, then maybe we could have a second brilliant community, and I'm more than welcome to volunteer my Facebook page for that. It's sitting there, it's not doing much. So if you guys want to post any interesting findings that you come across or anything that you would like some advice on, then go ahead and do that. My bot has probably been putting it into the chat. Yes, I can see he's doing it. So Facebook page, it's sitting there, it's not doing anything. I'm with Rod on this. He's usually recently complained that his Facebook page is kind of, it's very difficult to do something meaningful with Facebook pages, and I find that as well. I mean, I do use it, but is there a lot of interaction? No. So perhaps, if we want to do that, if you've rendered anything thanks to my tips, or if you want to do anything, if you want advice and feedback on something, or if you've created something, post a link there, and we'll see what happens. Also, another thing, and this is going into this community here. I like video games, and I like pretty video games. And tomorrow afternoon, 4 p.m., I'm going to do a game stream on Subnautica, and it'll be less about playing the video game. It's more about hanging out. If you want to hang out and have a chat, that's the time to do it. If you have any questions, anything you want to discuss, drop along. It'll be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time tomorrow on a Saturday. I'll try and do this every Saturday. See where we go with this. That is, I think, 4 o'clock. That's about 9 o'clock in the UK, 10 o'clock in the evening in Germany, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning in Australia, because Steve is probably in bed now. He can't watch this because it's like 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning now in Australia, and I know that he wants to have a chat. So there we go. We can all come together Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Play a round of Subnautica. It's a beautiful 3D rendered game. I'll try and give you a 1080-60 stream, and we'll see what we can find underwater. My friends, thank you so much for joining me today, and I will wish you a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I'll have a chat with Julia, and I'll see how that doctor's appointment went, and I hope I will see you next Friday for more DAZ Schnick Schnack and Shenanigans. Take care. Bye bye.